Yeah, so thank you for the question. As you say, that's a very specific question, and I think some discussion with TAs will be uh, by far the best strategy to talk about this in any depth, but I'll offer some general comments. So a key when we talk about representing in the model a scenario which represents an intervention that posits a certain program that's in place. I heard you um, mention this idea of like uh, a program that might help people quit smoking or manage tobacco use or engage in healthier behaviors or what have you. Or if we have a program, one of the decisions that needs to be made about model scope is the degree to which the model will represent the dynamics of that program. And as compared to, contrasted with a model that simply posits some change in behavior induced by that program. So yesterday, uh, within the model that we were working with, we basically had a set of alternative scenarios that were depicted in a very stylized fashion. And this is very common in modeling, but it's not ubiquitous. And for agent-based modeling, it's particularly an important choice. So I want to be rather concrete on this. So like we had a baseline scenario, and then we said, okay, suppose there were a scenario where we had encouraged cessation, and that induced a higher rate of cessation. So here the cessation rate is associated with a hazard rate of 8.0 per year, and by contrast, in the baseline, the cessation rate is half of that. So we've essentially posited a doubled cessation rate for this scenario. Or conversely, the baseline has a relapse rate of 6.0. And for this scenario, focusing on lowering relapse, we've simply posited that we're able to reduce it to 3.0. And so these scenarios let us probe the sort of change of behavior that we might hope is achieved by a program. But they're actually not simulating at some sort of articulated level, some sort of dynamic level, the dynamics of that, a cessation-oriented program that reaches people in certain places in the community and involves them in relapse prevention by use of nicotine patches and gum and nicotine gum and cognitive behavioral therapy, and where we simulate a person's adherence level to using nicotine patches and the degree to which it helps lower their chance of cessation or what have you. And we're certainly not like here having a thing where like the reduction of initiation here, if we reduce initiation, we're not doing so in a way that simulates like a peer-led intervention effort focused on high schools where high school kids are reached out to by their peers and engage in healthy, health promotion activities, and where information on smoking dangers of smoking is given out and it shifts their minds over time. We're not simulating a thing where peer educators have to be trained, and we want to capture the cost side associated with that side of the program, and the dropout rate among the educators. So like there are situations, and indeed some of my modeling has involved rather articulated descriptions of programs, because we want to characterize the cost. We want to characterize the scale up effects, how many peer educators we need, or we need to recruit, and how many trainers we need to train the trainers to train those educators, and so on. And you can do that because it's a dynamic model. That's a process. Like leading the program is a process. And so in principle, that could be within the scope of the model. Most of the time it's not. I would say 95% of models that focus on impacts of programs, maybe I'm being unkind, maybe it's 90 to 95%, will tend to posit some change induced by the program. Maybe they'll work to try to estimate what that is based on references in the literature, how successful anti uptake efforts are reducing the rate of initiation among youth, or how much cessation rates can be realistically raised by programs in the past, and you use that to set your elevated rate of smoking cessation for your intervention. And you just go with that, and then you simulate its logical effects. So there you're not, what's outside the scope of the model is the dynamics, the behavior, the evolution of the program. And rather you're just examining what is the impact if we could achieve this. And the fact that you're talking about like a division of people, one group in this group, one group in that group, suggests to me that at the least you may want to have within a person, like in the model, some state as to whether they are intervened upon, and if so, by which arm of the study. And there may be some dynamics among that, like maybe someone is in this arm of the study but drops out, and they're lost to follow up, and so they go back to a state of being no longer part of the program. You might, and where their presence in a state might lead to the behavior to change while they're in that program, or what have you. So that would be a potential thing. It sounds like at least you want to be clear about like who's in what program, and you could, an even simpler way that might be adequate, might be fit for purpose, I don't know, you need to discuss it with a TA, is you could have a parameter, and you could have, there's a thing called an option list in any logic, which allows you to say like, there's these possibilities, these nominal categories. So like unintervened upon, forgive the poor language there, or like intervention arm 1, intervention arm 2, and you have a parameter for a person which is drawn, which is of a type given by that option list, and so then each person knows like, oh, I'm an intervention arm 1 person, and so if so, that will affect my behavior in a certain way. I would talk with a TA about this, about what sort of scope you are looking for that sort of model. It's a rather specific question, but those are some things which strike me right away as needing examination. I want to highlight I want to highlight a threefold division. that is routine within system dynamics literature, but is underappreciated, I think, within the HMS modeling community. And I think it's an extremely important division. In general, when we talk about model, so one of the first tasks that's done early for a model is to conceptualize the model and sort of map out possible relationships between things. Is also often involved. But what's involved here is a process that's boundary setting and scoping of the model, deciding what's going to be considered by the model or not. But that very terminology I've just used, what's considered by the model or not, is too blunt. You actually want to distinguish between three types of things, not two. It's not dichotomous. And this indicates the threefold division, which holds just as much for agent-based models as for system dynamics models or discrete event simulation. Here you divide things into one of three categories. Factors that are endogenous to the model. These would be factors that the model produces, it generates, it gives rise to them. So for our model here, for example, there were certain factors that were endogenous. I mean, someone's smoking status at a given time is endogenous. Someone's heart disease status is endogenous. It's generating it over time. Over time, a given person in the model will be in this state or that, and movement between them is dictated by model relationships. In this case, the transition going this way. People's death is endogenous. The number of people in the model who have heart disease or who are current smokers, that's endogenous within this model. We could make finer divisions, the number of the rate of heart disease among those 50 plus. That's also endogenous. It's affected by many things, including smoking status, including, the chance of having developed heart disease by now, but their chance of having, the chance of mortality that has led them to survive now means they're probably more likely to not have heart disease now for a given person than would otherwise be the case. If mortality were turned off, I bet we'd see a lot more older folks with heart disease. Like really old folks. So these are things that are endogenous. The model produces them. We don't tell the model at any one time, this person is in the smoking state, and this other person is in this former smoker state. Except at the initial time, we don't tell the model that. The model tells us. The model produces these things. We give it an initial state, and then after that, it evolves according to these relationships that we've dictated. And this is true of all three of the modeling traditions. How you describe change is different for those modeling traditions. Here, an important manner, not the only, but important one is with state charts. There's also interactions over networks and sending messages and so on that we'll be embracing in a few, short time from now, for the balance of the morning. By contrast, in system dynamics, there's a current state. So here, there's a current state is dictated by these states, right, in the state chart, and currents of variables, things like my heart disease hazard rate that applies, or my kind of in a epiphenomenal way, my color, as dictated by heart health or what have you. And there may be other things that are in variables sometimes, like the number of times I've relapsed in the past or something. So those describe state here, and the evolution is dictated here by things like occurrences of these transitions and receiving a message and so on. In system dynamics, the state is captured, in stock and flow modeling and system dynamics. So in that type of simulation, the state of the system is captured to the stocks, the values of the stocks completely define the state of the system. And the change, the incremental change that occurs doesn't occur by transitions here, it occurs by flows. And those dictate how a given stock will change over the next little bit, much as here, someone's smoking status, how it changes over the next little bit is dictated by transitions involved in any messages that might come in that might affect that. In discrete event simulation, the state is dictated by like the number of people in each of the queues in the system or in each of the blocks, and then how it changes over the next little bit is defined by the connectivity of the workflow. We'll be seeing these later in the week, so this is admittedly a very abstract description I'm giving. But the point is all of them have some state and some little bits of evolution. And that gives rise to endogenous behavior. The state evolves in each of those over time in ways we don't dictate. The model dictates it. It's dictated by flows in system dynamics. It's dictated here by these transitions and receipt of messages and so on. It's dictated in discrete event by, the movement of people down this workflow in a way that's resource limited. That's endogenous things. The model tells us. We don't tell it. It tells us. Endogenous things like are represented in the model, but how they evolve is dictated by the model, by the rules we put into place in the initial state dictate that. And exogenous things we tell to the model. They're represented in the model, like endogenous things. They're in the model. We have some representation of them in the model. So they're there. There's a there. But we dictate with pre-specified assumptions what to assume for them. Maybe it's a fixed value. So here, we endogenously specify certain quantities. And you can read many of them off right here for any given run of the model population size, the birth rate, the initiation rate, the cessation rate, the relapse rate, whether mortality is enabled a lot. Those are exogenous assumptions that we impose for a given scenario, certain values of those. Those happen to be fixed, happen to be constant. There's other assumptions which are maybe hard-coded here, like this one, that are also exogenous assumptions about the occurrence of the occurrence of mortality for someone with a healthy heart, and so on. These are exogenous assumptions. And they are, we tell the model these things. Endogenous things, the model tells us. Here, we tell the model. Endogenous things are generated. Exogenous things are told to the model. But they're told in a manner that's pre-specified. And what that means is it could be fixed, or it could change in some predefined way, in some way that's fully specified. For example, maybe we say over the course of the months, the mean temperature in Saskatoon will be such and such. Or we say over the next 5 years, assume this level of unemployment rate for a model of homelessness and its interaction with employment status and housing costs. Or we assume this level of inflation for housing costs or whatever. So exogenous things don't have to be constant, although they, for simplicity, for parsimony, they often are, but sometimes they are just pre-specified as something over time in a totally pre-specified way. Endogenous things vary over time, in general, in a way the model generates. Exogenous things are told to the model. They can vary over time, but a lot of the time they're constant. And then there are some things which are ignored or excluded. Often they're put for now in a parking lot. There may be some things that we don't think about, and those are dangers that we don't even consider them, that are ignored or excluded. And we have to be cautious about that. Generally, we want to be kind of judicious, one step at a time with this model. We build understanding, we build confidence in the model by adding things in bit by bit. And there's a large parking lot of things, if you can forgive the term, a large parking lot of things that we'll consider adding later, which maybe we know stakeholders are interested, or we think there's a case that they may need to be added for face plausibility in this area or that area. Maybe we want to examine them for later versions of the model, but we leave them there for now. And we consciously are saying the model does not include those. Like all models have limitations. Some of them are useful at any one time. And over time, those limitations will evolve with our learning as we build in certain things that we think are important in the human theater of things, because of our scientifically evolving understanding of what's driving these processes, the importance of certain things for dynamics. So I'll say you really want to take into account these three divisions when you think about a model. And it's a good exercise for an ABM as you go through successive versions to ask at any one time what's exogenous, what's ignored. If you're planning a new version, how are you going to change this? Maybe some things that were exogenous you'll make endogenous, or maybe you have some things that are endogenous that haven't really been yielding big bang for the buck, and you move it to exogenous. Maybe there are some things that were ignored that you'll bring into the exogenous phase, and so you'll represent them explicitly, but in a pre-specified manner, maybe for the sake of sensitivity analysis. Maybe for the sake of just starting to think about formally about how they affect things. So this is an extraordinarily important division. And I would say reflect early and often on it. It'll be my advice. Hope for those are useful comments. Okay. Any other questions or any other points people would like to make? Okay. In the absence of that, I think